Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this roundtable session on electricity storage and how this enabling technology could help accelerate the energy transition. I'm Emma Gibson. I'm Director of Operation of a small energy storage technology company based in London called Highview Power. And it's my pleasure to be moderating this session today for IRENA. I'm a first-time moderator, so please bear with me. In terms of the structure for this session, we're going to have three brief presentations from some of our esteemed panel, and then invite all of the panel up to the top onto the stage for a roundtable discussion. Just to briefly introduce electricity storage. Electricity storage is really seen as vital to accelerate renewable energy deployment. Up to date, pumped hydro has dominated electricity storage space, but batteries and other storage technologies are increasingly deployed. As costs go down and performance improves, we're beginning to pave the way to see further deployment of such systems to be used economically, helping to increase the share of renewable energy into the system and providing services for grid management and operation. In this session, we hope to provide you with a better understanding of the complexities of the next stage of this transformation of the energy sector and the contribution that electricity storage in stationary applications can make to this transition. We'll also look to address the implications for policy, regulation, and markets. The roundtable panel includes a variety of experts on electricity storage technologies who will discuss the role of storage, the current state of battery energy storage technologies and deployment, and their use in various applications. So during the presentations and for the discussion session, we invite you to register onto Attendify and use the question and answer facility there so that we can gather questions for the discussion centre session at the round table. First, so moving now on to the presentations, I'd like to introduce Mr. Vlad Dubovics, a senior engineer at GE Power, to the stage to talk about battery energy storage systems, ancillary services, and beyond.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Emma, for introduction. So, battery storage kind of became a buzzword recently, in the recent years, and not for nothing. Yesterday, I was heavily reliant on battery technologies in my smartphone, which unfortunately let me down just before I was able to get back to the hotel. But I did manage to find my way eventually. So, battery technologies also seem to be a key challenge to solve for transport applications, to alleviate range anxiety and things like that in that industry. And now we're talking about battery technologies for grid applications. So my talk will be focused on an overview of where the battery technologies are used now in grid storage, focusing more on the ancillary services, but also giving you an idea of where we might see them in the next decade or so, and why. So a bit of background about myself. I work for GE Energy Consulting. That's part of GE Power. We do projects for ourselves, for our businesses. We also do different projects like grid integration studies, power production modeling, some of more technical studies for external customers as well. I won't pause for too long on the next slide. This is really what all the event is about today. So decentralization and decarbonization and the following decentralization poses challenges, further challenges from other sectors like electrification of transport. And batteries are one of the technologies that can help to solve these challenges. And first of all, let's look at how much of batteries are already deployed and how they're used globally. And here I've tried to map where we're seeing the grid storage already in the world. As you can see, there is, well, it's depends on how you see it. It can seem like a lot, 2 gigawatts roughly, not taking into account projects that are at planning stages or will be commissioned soon. And I guess a key message here is that you can see how sparsely they're distributed. So there are only a few countries that have, in yellow, that have some penetration of batteries. Most of the countries are still in gray and no batteries there. So I've put there a few countries that are leading in that market, so the USA, Germany, Australia, Japan, UK, although I didn't try to differentiate between different uses for batteries in these markets, they're actually used in different ways. And also battery technologies that's used in different countries different. And on the next slide, I'm trying to show what is the dominant application at the moment and where we're heading. And now here in green and light green, you can see that really the backbone of applications for battery storage is, at the moment, is ancillary services such as frequency regulation and balancing. And we're starting to see more batteries entering the energy and capacity services. That's blue, light blue, although not to the same extent yet. As well as the third sort of set of applications, transmission and distribution services. This is only probably individual projects that are using batteries for these applications primarily. Well, the comment I have to make on this slide as well, that although I've tried to separate batteries into different applications. In reality, many of the batteries will be used for several applications at once, and you will see from you will hear from other speakers, I think, that's really crucial to enable batteries to be used for several applications, not just limit them to one. But trying to understand why we're seeing them in ancillary services markets and not so much in energy markets yet. I think we have to look at the financial side of things, and for that purpose, on the next slide, I've tried to compare the approximate cost of battery technology. Now I'm talking about lithium-ion because this has so far been a dominant technology, but as we may discuss later, may not remain the dominant, or we'll see. It depends on the application, but for the purpose of this slide, that's lithium-ion technology, comparing that to the open-cycle gas turbine on the annual levelized fixed cost basis and having a forecast looking ahead. And what we can see is that it is still more expensive to put battery on the grid than to put an extra peaker power plant. And we can see that the economy is coming together, and for low duration battery being actually at some point a better option also on the financial side. But that's despite the drop in battery costs that hasn't happened yet. But at the same time, so that's one side of the question. Batteries can be advantageous for different reasons, for environmental reasons, for some of the technical characteristics that they have compared to the conventional generation. But what I'm trying to show here is that purely on the economic basis, it may not always make sense to put the battery compared to the conventional generation, and that's a challenge for batteries to come down in prices and be able to compete with traditional technologies. And another key message here is that what we're seeing, that obviously for the same capacity, for the same power, it will be cheaper to install a short duration battery, and that's the lower range of the blue area on the slide. And so it probably makes sense to look at how we can make use of low duration batteries at the moment because that's something you can get cheaper. And I think one of the solutions here is hybridization. So making hybrids of batteries and power plants and get the best of both worlds. And that's something that we've seen happening. Installing the peaker power plants that have batteries within them, and that enables to capture all of basically the revenue streams for different markets. So as you can see in the table, you can, if you have a battery combined with the turbine, then you can provide non-spinning reserve and energy because your GT won't be limited in how long it can operate. But then having a battery there allows you to respond much quicker. And while the turbine starts up, you can provide ancillary services, spinning reserves, which is a high cost, high value market. So that's one way. Another example I'd like to show here is example from a Hawaiian study that we've did recently. Not going into details on that slide. I think just like to focus on what that graph is showing. So what it is showing is that we try to model the market in Oahu, one of the islands in Hawaii, with including different batteries in the power system. And what we have seen is having larger batteries with higher power and longer duration obviously allows you to displace more thermal generation with your solar and wind. So on the right you see in green and yellow the increased generation from solar and wind, and on the left you see the decreased generation from your conventional generation. Well, this is not really surprising. If you have a battery in the system, you can reduce curtailment. What was more interesting is that if you look at the battery with the same total capacity, like for example concentrating on the 200 megawatt battery on the system, as you go from longer duration and low power battery to shorter duration high power battery, you can actually increase the benefit to the system. And this was specific to that power system because in that power system the reserves are very valued and there is a shortage of reserves, and thus allowing batteries to provide reserve and having a high power for that is more critical in that power system than having a long duration battery. Once again, that's typical. That's just one example, and we have to be careful not to apply the same conclusions to all markets. And that's my final slide. I think we'll hear more on that. Just a brief overview of the key barriers, what batteries are facing, and I think one is what I mentioned, the high investment cost, and the ways how to overcome that is at the moment financial incentives is part of the game. Market rules that have to be designed taking into account battery storage. That's something that is critical for wider adoption of batteries, and I think we'll hear that from other speakers as well. And final, lack of awareness of the technology benefits itself, and I think IRENA is contributing on that front, and we're doing our studies to increase the awareness as well. So with that, I'd like to conclude. Should I go down?
Thank you, Vlad, for that presentation. I found that quite interesting. We've got a slightly different presentation coming up now from Mark Higgins, Chief Operating Officer at Stratogen, who'll be talking about emerging applications of storage.
Good morning, everybody. So I'm Mark Higgins from Stratogen, and I'm thrilled to be here to chat with you a little bit about what we're seeing from California. So obviously everyone is aware about how quickly battery costs are dropping and how storage is becoming central to grid transformation around the world. There's eye-popping headlines just about every day about bigger and bigger and bigger procurements that are happening. And lower costs, and utilities all around the world finding storage to be economically competitive with traditional grid solutions. And while cost is driving a lot of this, value is the other side of the equation here. And there's a lot of different grid services that storage can offer. It's the original multi-use asset within the power sector. So, quick question for you. How many of you have a smartphone? Of course, everybody in the room has a smartphone. So how absurd would it be if your telecommunications provider said that you were prohibited from using your smartphone to do anything but make phone calls because it would be anti-competitive with the desktop computer manufacturer? Seems kind of absurd to even ask the question, right? Well, that's kind of how the electric power system is set up today. Be it ring fencing around transmission assets or not letting behind-the-meter assets provide grid services. Those are all examples of 20th century regulations that were designed for a 20th century power system that create artificial barriers to storage providing the full range of services that it can provide the grid with. So, you know, my message today is cost is one side of the equation, but the other side of the equation is the regulatory reform and market design reform that is needed within every market around the world to enable storage to participate on a level playing field with traditional grid technologies to provide the full range of value and services that it can provide you with. And when you do that, you start to see more and more applications being unlocked for storage. Obviously, we heard from Vlad just a few minutes ago about frequency regulation being some of the low-hanging fruit within the storage industry, and you're seeing commercial deployments and frequency regulation applications in different markets where frequency regulation markets have been reformed to provide value for fast responding resources. Local capacity peaker replacement is another really interesting example where you're starting to see more and more commercial deployments. It started in, you've got examples in Australia and different parts of the United States where you're seeing storage actually come in and play a role, essentially substituting for a peaker solution. And recently you saw a 2.3 gigawatt hour procurement from PG&E in Northern California, replacing a variety of different conventional plants in the Bay Area with energy storage. This number, 2.3 gigawatt hours of procurement from any individual utility, would have seemed absurd even 6 months ago. But here we are, you know, maybe 9 months after the world's largest energy storage project, Tesla's Hornsdale facility, went into operation in Australia. We have PG&E buying 2.3 gigawatt hours of storage. This is going to be more and more common. T&D infrastructure deferral. You're starting to see applications, particularly at the distribution level, more and more at the transmission level, where regulatory reform is beginning to occur that allows storage to act as a transmission reliability resource in a broader set of value stack that it can provide the grid with. And you're starting to see multi-use applications. I think PG&E's use of sodium sulfur battery solution in Northern California was one of the first examples of that, where they were looking to use it as a distribution reliability and distribution deferral asset, but then also used it as a market resource. And it was a test example of that, but we're starting to see that happen more and more in different markets. So that's an application that is commercially proven and commercially viable if you've got the regulatory reforms in place to unlock that value. We're starting to see a migration of behind-the-meter assets being used not just for customer demand charge mitigation in markets that have demand charges, but now also for DSOs, distribution owners, who have demand charges that they're managing from the transmission system, using that for behind-the-meter assets to actually enable distribution owners to reduce demand charges as well from the transmission system, benefiting all of their customers. So that's another application that in many markets there are regulatory barriers against this, but when you change the rules and you allow storage to play on a level playing field with other technologies, those regulatory barriers, once they're addressed, this becomes a commercially viable solution. Dispatchable solar and PV plus a storage peaker, another application that's starting to become more and more common. We're seeing this particularly in Arizona as they're looking to use storage as a way to replace conventional peakers when paired with solar, PV in particular. Arizona has a very peaky load profile, and it's an evening peak because of a lot of air conditioning. It's a desert. You need a lot of air conditioning, and they've got a great solar resource. However, they're misaligned. So storage plus PV is an application that has become commercially proven in those types of markets. DER alternatives is another area where you're starting to see projects deployed where behind-the-meter assets can actually act as the T&D resource, the T&D reliability resource. New York is at the forefront of this through the New York REV process, but you're seeing it in other markets as well. California, Australia through AGL's virtual power plant that they've been working on, as well as the proposed 650 megawatt hour, 50,000 home behind-the-meter solution in South Australia. And then renewable energy plus long-duration storage is another area that I think in the long run will become more common. We haven't quite seen this happen in really large commercial deployments just yet, but there's starting to be some that are proposed. Seasonal storage is probably the holy grail as we try and get to a really high renewables or even carbon-free electric power system. And you know, we're starting to see more and more commercial trials and RD&D go into this. We're not there yet. Hopefully someday I can tick a box off here saying that we're there as well for this. So a lot of really interesting areas. Message is it's not just cost declines. It's also about enabling storage to play that to play a role as a multi-use asset on the grid, just like we did with smartphones. And I think that that's really important that we look to reforming the electric power system, regulatory rules, as well as the market design to reflect the fact that we're dealing with 21st century technologies now that play a different role in the grid than conventional technologies did. Just a couple of things is if you're interested in this topic and you're coming to the Climate Action Summit next week, there's a storage event if you're interested in, I can help get you into. And then also in November, Energy Storage North America is a great way to learn more about storage, but I don't want to focus too much on that. And just want to let you know that if you are interested in learning more about it, come see me. I'm happy to tell you a little bit more about that. Thank you.
So our final presentation is by Dr. Katrin Schreeren, Head of Regulatory and Public Affairs at TECO. Katrin will be sharing her thoughts on digitalizing energy for innovative business models.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you to IRENA to let me speak on consumers and energy storage. TECO is in the business of residential customers, and we are talking about energy storage in this session, so I will focus on this question and to let you say at the beginning that one consumer single household battery cannot participate in the ancillary services market yet. You need, in order to become a prosumer and be able to stabilize the network, you need to be in a pool, and that's actually what I will be talking about, the pool of batteries, the pool that we have been doing in Switzerland. So actually, I propose to first tell you a little bit about TECO, then what is proposed in the, and then look into the regulatory questions, what has been proposed in the EU winter package, and see what the barriers are still are, what barriers we have to tackle in order to make prosumers real prosumers. So TICO has been founded in 2012 under the name of Swisscom Energy Solutions by Repower and Swisscom, the Swiss telecoms incumbent in Switzerland. We have created a virtual power plant based on heat pumps and electrical heatings at the beginning and are integrating batteries. We have connected more than 10,000 devices in Switzerland, so this means more than 7,000 households, delivering ancillary services in the form of FCR and AFRR to Swissgrid, the TSO in Switzerland, since 2013. So this means that we are reacting quite quickly in the basis of seconds with the pool as a normal power plant to the TSO. So as the system is developed in-house, 100% in-house, we have evolved also into self-consumption, integrating storage, and allowing visualization of consumption and production to the prosumer. So there you see the little dots, all the prosumers that we have put together to form what we say is one of the biggest smart grids in the world, based on household loads and prosumers. So we have evolved, TICO is a platform that allows grid services, where you see on the right ancillary services, but it can also be used for peak shaving and other things on the one hand, and incentivizes the households to be part of the community by giving a home energy management systems where he can monitor the consumption and the production of the devices that are connected. So speaking about home energy management systems, the customer can monitor, there's the control, has an app, he can monitor his production and the consumption and save energy and act as a community. As I said, one battery, home battery cannot participate in the ancillary services market, but in a pool they can. So one example of a client in Switzerland, because we working together with the utility, is EKS. They are in Schaffhausen. They install our systems with the storage. And they also like it because they can do advanced analytics, data analytics about the consumption and the production in the house, also behind the meter. Another example I give you is also where we work together is Sonnen, that has helped them to create the Sonnen community. So that's TICO. And now the regulatory framework is actually improving our favors active customers. Article 15 of the Electricity Directive contains a definition of active customers. According to this article, member states shall ensure that final customers are entitled to generate, store, consume, and self-generated electricity in all organized markets, and that they should be subject to transparent and non-discriminatory network charges, accounting separately for the electricity fed into the grid and the electricity consumed. So there is some movement about the active, the prosumer. So the model that I showed you is something that is pushed forward by the winter package. Also, the question of the energy communities is dealt with in the winter package. It is also foreseen that there should be non-discriminated treatment of communities based on prosumers, and the same goes for demand response. So this actually is moving forward, and in these years of 2000 to last year we had some parts of the winter package that has already been adopted, but the adoption is, the process is still going through. So obviously there are some things that have to be improved. We'll not go into the details, but what we see is that despite of the winter package, you still have need for action by the TSO, because you see that in the TSOs do different things in different countries. So, for example, the pre-qualification criteria are different, IT standards are different, the testing procedures are different, and this needs to be harmonized from our point of view, so that access to the market for active consumer or prosumer communities is guaranteed. We also see that you have then the national implementation in the nitty-gritty is actually something that is not favoring very much the energy communities, because it, for example, in Germany, the Mieterstromgesetz gives an incentive, but on the other hand, it gives a price cap. Same thing for the in Switzerland, where the price for what you sell internally to the tenants should not be higher than the ones of the price of the electricity that you buy from the electricity market. So actually, even if the winter package is something that brings improvements from a point of view for the prosumers, then the national transposition, we still have things that are not completely favoring this evolution. We also see that even in the winter package, it's stated that demand response and aggregation should not be discriminated against. That the N3 is actually had launched a consultation at the beginning of the year to ask to see FCR units providing with limited energy reservoirs, so storage, and that might lead to a discrimination of storage of home batteries compared to other power plants that then provide ancillary FCR. So in the end, what I wanted to say is that yes, the winter package is bringing improvements in terms of prosumers, but there are still two things that need to be looked at. First of all, the national transposition, and second, the implementation by the TSOs and the N3. And the third thing that we might discuss in the discussion is I've been focusing now on the frequency regulation, but there are other markets where prosumers could work, communities could work in, and these markets are sometimes open in some countries and sometimes not. So let's speak about capacity markets.
So thank you to all our speakers for your presentations. I'd like to invite you to come up and take your seat on the stage, along with the other members of our panel. We have Mr. Dong Hui, Chief Expert from the China Electric Power Research Institute, Mr. Gauthier Dupont, Director of Power Business Batteries at NGK Europe GmbH, Mr. Rashid Bayed, Head of Implementation at Mazen from Morocco, and Mr. Takashi Yano, Deputy General Manager, Energy Systems Division, Sumitomo Electric Industries, Japan. So I'd just like to start the session by inviting some views from the other panel members who were not giving presentations. And starting with, let's just get my page. starting with Mr. Rashid Bayed. We've talked a lot about battery storage, but I think you've been working on other forms of storage integration. I'd like to understand how your experience has impacted your thoughts on battery storage and storage in general in the electricity system as we move forward.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. I will share another kind of experience. It's another perspective for storage system. And by the way, they're a part of the experience in Morocco. So as you may know, Morocco has launched a new plan to develop renewable energy massively to achieve 52% of total installed capacity by 2030. This plan starts from 2010, and right now I will share with you my experience during the last 7 years. So when we talk about renewable energy and we talk about large scale of plants with that kind of objective, 52%, we are facing two main challenges. The first one is the managing the intermittency. And the second one is how to be able to produce during the peak hour. In Morocco, peak hours is from 6 in the afternoon until midnight, depending on the season, with the variation of 1 to 1.5 hours. So the question is to reach this objective and to allow balancing the demand and the production. And first answer is that without having a storage system, it will be difficult to reach this kind of objective. So we launched the first project based on CSP technology because of the development of thermal storage system. And the first time it was the aim was to have production during 3 hours by night. So we decide to define this kind of condition in our term of reference. And we had, at the end of the process, a very good price in 2013. It was, at this moment, the lowest price per kilowatt hour in the CSP technology with storage capacity. After that, we launched another tendering process for 2 plants of total capacity of 350 megawatts. And we understand that storage at the end help to increase the capacity factor of the plant, but as well to decrease the price per kilowatt hour of the production. So we didn't define at this moment a maximum of storage capacity, but only a minimum, which is 3 hours. And we had several offers with more than 7 hours, which prove that storage is allowing to decrease the price and not the inverse. So this is another aspect of the positive effect of the storage system. Right now, there are another application for which we are working too, like for needles, for which we are developing plant using PV and CSP. So PV will be used during the day and CSP for storing energy and continue production by the night. This is part of our experience, and what I want to share with you is that storage for such kind of plants, CSP, or for peak plants, is at the end a good solution to decrease the price, to manage the intermittency, and to create a plant which is capable to produce even by the peak hours. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think Gauthier Dupont, you have some similar experiences, but with different technologies. From
is it working? Okay, good. So good morning, still. Yeah. Good morning, everybody. So my name is Gauthier Dupont. My background is I was a consultant, and now I'm working in the industry for one of the biggest battery manufacturer. It's a Japanese company. So I make it reverse. I would like to talk about my experience in Abu Dhabi. In Abu Dhabi, it's our largest client, and it's one of the most advanced countries in the world. The point is that it was not on the slide of VLAD because they do not communicate much on that. It's not in DOE database, so I see a question about database to IRENA, so that will be an interesting one, how to collect information. So we started 10 years ago, so we were much in advance from the market. And the lesson learned, the first one is about innovation, is that as a consultant, we consider that innovation is first to have good ideas. I think all of us, we have excellent ideas, okay? Think about quitting smoking, it's a good idea, but how to implement it. Not to forget to give a present to my wife for our wedding anniversary. That's an excellent idea, but sometimes we forget that. So the lesson learned from Abu Dhabi project is that innovation, it's about small stuff during implementation. Is that you face the real world and then you have to solve problems. And so for me now, innovation, it's an accumulation of small stuff. So the second lesson learned is cultural intelligence. The project is in Abu Dhabi with high-level Emiratis people, Japanese battery supplier, German consultant with people from around the world. I'm not German. The EPC contractor was from Lebanon. So I would like to give one small example about both aspects together, is that the Lebanese people, they found a way to improve the process during the construction, and then they asked NGK to make a test. So the testing was successful, so we gained at least half of the time for a certain phase. And then, okay, the Lebanese company, they say, okay, let's do it. And then the Japanese, they say no. And they say, yeah, you see, it's working, so let's do it. And this is a cultural challenge. It's that because, okay, I'm from Belgium, so if it works, okay, let's do it, and then we adapt the system. But for Japanese people there, they were not in the position to take the decision. They have to report to their manager, who has to report to the general manager. They have to make a committee to review all the safety aspects, which is very important on the construction, and then to go down for approval. So at the end, we implement this, and it improved a lot. But there were a lot of frustration from both sides. So one side was saying, okay, they are too bold, they take too much risk, and on the other side, that okay, they are not flexible. So I think this is my learning experience. It's to take care of the difference in the culture.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on then, just to invite Mr. Donghui to tell us a little bit about the situation in China with regards to energy storage.
Okay. I'm glad to have introduced about the energy storage in China. Just now, the president from the GE gave this space about the installation capacity of the BS, and I think some number is wrong. And actually, in China, until this month, and we just install 900 megawatt and 2 gigawatt now BS. So in the past 10 years, China pay more attention about the battery energy storage research and demonstration. And anymore, we more care about the lithium-ion battery and lead carbon battery and vanadium flow battery. And among of the installation capacity, 63% is lithium-ion battery, and 30% is about a lead carbon battery, and 5% is the vanadium flow battery. Currently, 50% is used the custom side for the battery, because currently the performance of the lithium-ion battery is increasing quickly, and the cost decrease quickly. And in 7 years ago, we have a concept about how to define the value of the battery. So give the concept is the equivalent generation equivalent generation cost is 7 years ago. The cost is 50 euro cent per kilowatt an hour. But in this year, the price can come to 7 euro cent per kilowatt an hour. So, and in the China, many the electricity, the price value and the peak difference is over 10 cent euro. So many the people can use the battery for in the customer for the battery. And currently in China, we have not a special police to support the BS because we haven't found a way to judge the value because we have not idea to define the BS in the grid is a component or is used for tool or some other something. So for the past 10 years, we have many the demonstration, but we have improved. Is the BSS is very useful for the grid, for the renewable the generation, but we haven't give the to define the value in the grid. So this is the current situation in China. So another times I think express 2 point of view. The firstly, maybe in my opinion, maybe in the next 5 or 10 years, I think lithium-ion battery and lithium carbon battery can maybe become a lead role in the battery because the lithium-ion battery with the highest density and the long life cycle life and the highest energy efficiency. And for the lead carbon, because it's the cheapest. So this is the first point of view. And the second point of view, among the lithium-ion battery, there are 3 kinds of the lithium-ion battery. Is the NCM battery and the LFP battery and the LTO battery. And of course, the NCM battery is widely used in the EV because it's the highest energy density. But the cycle life is not good, and the safety is not good. In the last year, there are 2 battery the system was fair and explosion, and in China, the just 1 megawatt. So, because let's use the NCM, and this July in Korea, there are 2 lithium-ion battery energy station and explore, and there's 10 megawatt or more the scale. So I think maybe the NCM battery may be useful for the EV, but not used for the energy storage or the larger energy storage system.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And finally, Mr. Takashi Yano, could you tell us a little bit about the market situation in Japan and how that might change?
Thank you. My name is Takashi Yano. I'm from Sumitomo Electric, Japan. I didn't expect, to be honest, your request to me. So I'm afraid I'm not a proper person to explain the Japanese, regulatory and the market situation, utility situation. But it's a good chance for me to introduce a little bit about that. So right now in Japan, utility sectors are so-called vertically integrated or regulated market scheme. Regulated scheme. So, but we are willing to open up the market and also targeting, change the market regulatory structure toward 2020 for open up the fully from the retail level to the wholesale level, everything. So on that story, before that, as Sumitomo Electric, my job is to develop and sell a flow battery system, which is a quite minority right now. And to utilize this flow battery system in Japan as a demand-side management system in a factory, in this scenario, we are enjoying 2 revenues. One is, of course, to reduce demand charge, of course, and the second one is revenue from the aggregator, so-called virtual power plant services or demand response. So just before starting this session, I discussed in this team, and I'm quite impressed on what Mark you said to me. We are going toward deregulation direction, but he complained about the California situation. Deregulation sometimes makes a hurdle for introducing new revenue streams. So that was quite shocked a little bit, and I was quite impressed and enjoying the discussion. So I'm looking forward to having another one here.
That's a perfect lead into the next question that I want to ask. So I'm going to take one of the questions from the floor, which is, given that they don't have the luxury of starting from scratch, what's the first step policymakers need to take to reform the regulation to make them fit for storage requirements? And as Mark's picked up the mic, I'll give him the first go.
I didn't want to be presumptuous there, but I think this is a great question, and I jumped at the opportunity to answer it because I really believe that learning from peers who are going through similar challenges is the best place for regulators to start. There are similarities and differences between electric power systems around the world, but fundamentally, many of the challenges that different parts of the world are facing when it comes to electricity market reform are the same. But you have vertically integrated utility structures, you have disaggregated utility structures, and then you have hybrids all around the world. So there are differences as well. But there are places around the world that have addressed these issues, and there's no reason why every single region of the world needs to reinvent the wheel to come up with a unique solution for their region. There's things that you can adapt from different places and things that will help jumpstart the conversation. And I honestly believe that a large part of why we don't see faster regulatory reform is because without concrete examples, regulators just honestly just don't have the courage necessarily to take the leap of faith and say, we need to make the change. But if you have concrete examples like California's energy storage roadmap, which helped address the comprehensively the barriers to adoption of energy storage in the state, or Australia's electricity network transformation roadmap, which took a look at what a low-carbon electricity sector in Australia looked like and what are the no-regret steps that Australia needed to take to get there. Those are the types of models that the rest of the world can take as an example. But also just frankly having the network of peers in different regions that you can pick up the phone and say, how did you deal with this particular situation? What advice would you give me? That's really important. If you need connections, come talk to me after this. I'm happy to give you some further suggestions on how to build those connections, but I really think that that's critical to accelerating this transition.
Has anybody else got some thoughts to add on that question? I'm sure somebody will. Katrin?
Well, storage has I'm speaking always on the residential sector. So home batteries, if you want the big and demand response linked to this, it is something that is introduced in the, well, as I said, in the winter package, but it's not, this doesn't mean that you have the same regulatory conditions in all the national countries. So what is needed is to then look into the transposition, the national transposition. In, for example, in France, you would have demand response, what they call effacement. You have it in the energy markets. You have the frequency regulation. You can participate in the NEBEF. So the energy markets are, you have all the energy markets so you can participate in with the effacement. But you can also go into different categories of the capacity market. You have even a special market just for the effaceur when you go into, when you participate in the réserve complémentaire, réserve rapide, which is another form of ancillary service. So it's a country, for example, where you have lots of possibilities for demand response to participate. But then there are other countries where markets are not open, that where you only have, for example, frequency regulation. And there are countries where it's not frequency regulation. What we are doing, FCR, AFRR, is even not possible. Like Italy, we could only, with a very high technology, could only participate in what is in France the réserve rapide. So it's each time. I think the principles are now laid down on the EU level, but what is missing is the national transposition, and there the process needs to be faster.
Regulation, there is a short-term and long-term challenge, especially in Europe. When we write a new regulation, like now, I don't remember the number of regulation in the clean energy package, but it's like 8. Can you imagine 8 new directives for the EU? So we will live with those regulations for the next, optimistically 20 years, most probably 30 years. The same for the grid codes. There are discussions today in Europe to adapt the grid codes to implement flexibility. Okay, so pro-consumers, storage, etc. This one will be maybe for 50 years. So, but when they are written and they are applied, it has very short-term impact on the technologies. So that's, from our side, the biggest challenge today when writing a regulation in the power sector, which was very traditional for now 100 years. We still work like at the beginning of the 20th century, talking about primary, secondary reserve, which is related to a rotating machine. So nowadays you have power electronics that react in milliseconds. You know, a storage system can give you 100% of the power in 100 milliseconds. including communication. There is no other technology that can do that. But it's another scheme completely from what we have today, that we are talking about seconds, because rotating machine, they have, you know, the inertia. So now the grid code, it looks like a small step approach and not the revolution of digital and power electronics. So, okay, I think for Europe it's too late. The draft is already written. We can change small stuff. But for other countries, please don't take especially Europe or US as the only example. Make your own exercise. And what's the purpose of it? What do we want with this regulation? And I think that I don't have to convince you, but we still have to convince other people that the final purpose is, okay, complete decarbonization of the sector, which is going through today. I think that in the sector, it's quite obvious that it's renewable and flexibility. And storage contribute to flexibility, prosumers, energy efficiency, demand-side management, EVs. There is a question about EV. I'm not sure we will have time to cover everything. And you know, that I think that's the most important, is that it's also awareness. I feel like 15 years ago, when we were fostering renewable energy, they were, you know, I was in Abu Dhabi, and they, you know, at that day they told me, okay, Gauthier, okay, nice discussion, but you know, we live on crude oil, so why we should invest in renewable? If you look now, okay, except China, but China is very impressive. The second region in the world that I can forecast you that in 5 years there will be more advanced than Europe, it's the Middle East. Okay, they have a lot of sun. You know, they are building 1 gigawatt just like this because they also have the money. So that's really impressive to see the change in the awareness on renewable. We don't need to convince people that renewable is something good. It's done. We tick the box. I think for flexibility and storage, helping in this topic, it's not yet there. Still, people believe that with gas turbine and still continuing with nuclear, okay, that's another topic again. We can continue like that for the next 50 and 100 years. So please, what is important today is still awareness and to work all together. Good.
Okay, Vlad, would you like to add something?
Yeah, just to echo what has just been said, I think awareness of the technology advantages is something that is very important, and just being aware of what the given technology can offer to the power market, and designing the policies around that, or maybe adding different services to the market, is something that can help to integrate these technologies. And an example is from the UK, the Enhanced Frequency Response Service that has been tailored to have a faster response, and therefore giving advantage to technologies like batteries that have that capability to provide that response. And therefore, that has been tendered a couple of years ago, and the entire capacity was won by batteries. So that's one example. And then other advantage that batteries have is, for example, the modularity and the ability to install distributed energy at lower capacities, so minimizing the minimum capacity required to enter the market, and being in the wholesale market is another thing that should be looked at. So things like that.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pick up on a question that we've talked about, or we've been looking at before, in terms of the markets and segments that might surprise us by how they grow in the coming years. Does anybody have any thoughts about where those surprises may come for the flexibility services, particularly provided by electricity storage? It's not there.
What's the specific question?
And what market segments applications are set to surprise us by their growth in the coming years?
I think peaker replacement is probably what I view as the largest growth segment in the short to medium term. It's become, in many markets, it's becoming extremely competitive. And I think it's quite complementary to growth in renewables because it shifts the peak in a manner that makes it particularly economically viable for storage to play that role. As the utilization of peakers is declining and the peak period is sort of compressing, storage starts to look more and more and more competitive.
Okay, I don't have a crystal ball to answer this question. Nobody has, but still, I agree with you. For peaker units, deferral. So in fact, it's deferral of investment or alternative to let's say dirty peaker units. But for doing this, it depends for each country how many hours of storage you need. And I think that maybe okay. We hope that long duration storage, so more than 4 hours of storage, could emerge faster than maybe expected, because that will give much more flexibility to the network. Because for the moment, because of UK, in fact, we can blame them to focus on short duration just for frequency control, which okay, it's good. But it's a very, very small market. You know, UK, it's already saturated, so with short duration batteries. So the market is dead. So we are only talking about a few hundred megawatt per country. So it's not so much. So we will not be able to develop the storage market and the technology that are needed with such a small market. So long duration to provide an alternative to peak units could be, let's say, a short-term driver.
Okay, yes, Takashi.
In addition to what they said, I'd like to, I think demand-side management with energy storage would be very promising from the next 3 to 5 years. Because, as I said, it's quite easy to grab the dual value streams from the site and also the grid. And, if your government offers a subsidy to somebody else, I don't recommend so, of course. It's quite easy for ratepayers or taxpayers to accept that idea. But, for the long run, I think the balance between a centralized storage system, grid system, and also between the centralized one and the decentralized one, the balance is quite important. So I think we have to consider about healthy growth for both sides eventually.
Okay. So picking up on the peaker point, there's a specific question here for you, Vlad, on how you compare your battery OCGT cost comparison to recent prices showing solar and wind and lithium-ion batteries beating CCGT on first costs by 2021.
Right. So I haven't seen the report mentioned, but as you've seen on the slide, we've used the cost for batteries going forward. So the cost of batteries has reduced dramatically in the recent years, and we are seeing that trend continuing. So we're going to see some reduction in cost due to, for example, shying away from cobalt-heavy chemistries to slightly cheaper chemistries, some cost reduction on the balance of plant, like we see the reduction of the cost of bidirectional inverters if we're talking about the grid storage application for batteries. So that will bring the cost even further down. And as you've seen, it may be comparable to the OCGT at some point. The reason I've compared that to OCGT and not CCGT is because the application that I've seen there for battery storage is peak replacement. And now if we're talking about CCGTs, that's probably in many countries will be about base loading. Well, maybe not so much in some of the countries, but still. And if you compare batteries with the CCGTs, it's a slightly different comparison. And on my slide, I've shown the comparison of the fixed levelized cost, but not including variable costs. Now, if you compare batteries combined with solar or wind, you probably would like to take variable costs into account as well. And now how the comparison will work out will depend on the cost of your gas, for example, that you use for CCGT. And, well, your solar and wind will be free of charge. And that's I guess, the advantage. But then to be able to replace base load, you would need so much overcapacity in this solar and wind farms that I doubt that in many countries at the moment that will be economically viable, but there might be cases. It's down to the particular example.
And a slightly related, more general question to the power panel. How will the power sector benefit from the expected decline in battery prices resulting from large-scale production by gigafactories by 2020? 2030, even.
So it's interesting because I think that the market for stationary storage is actually dwarfed by the market for electric vehicles. So in large part, EVs are going to be the driving force of cost reductions within the overall battery market segment. And obviously that's not driving all types of batteries that are on the grid, but they will be setting the cost curve that all the technology classes will have to compete with to be able to be competitive in the sector. So I think as goes EVs, goes the market for stationary storage.
Costs for a manufacturer, it's a very sensitive question. And price also, of course, because you have the margin in between. But basically, I think for the moment, there is a lack of transparency of the real cost because you have big players on the market. They squeeze their price down to zero margin or even negative margin just to get a position on the market. I can tell you, I will name you because it was publicly announced. It's ADF for UK. But it was a small conference in Dubai, so you have to fly there to hear that. So they clearly explain that they do not expect any return on investment for the 49 megawatts. They just want to position themselves to acquire experience because experience will be, I think, one of the most differentiating factors between companies. There is a lot of players. Many of them will disappear. And like in all sectors, you will remain with 5, 6 maximum big players. So, and because with experience, you can reduce your cost. Because implementation costs in the power sector, it's not only for storage, but for all technology, it's quite a big part of the price. So as a manufacturer, we always say that, okay, we can indeed reduce the cost, okay, but okay, we need a market for that first, okay, so please tell me also what is your target price for you as a customer. I never get an answer to this question. When I ask clients or the sector. Another one is that it's not only about the batteries. You have the PCS, so the conversion system. Okay, it's only 10% of the price, but still construction, the maintenance of PCS, it's more costly than for the batteries, depending on the technology of the batteries. But in our case, it's true. Land, okay, you have to pay for the land and everything. And also it's to secure the revenue. I think the bigger risk, especially in Europe today, is that it will be forbidden to have long-term contracts for storage. We are talking about 3 years contract maximum for an investment that it's for minimum 15 years. Okay, in our case, the lifetime of our battery, it's up to 20 years, and we are working to reach the target of 25, which correspond to IPPs. Doesn't make sense to propose 50 years of lifetime. And yes, that's a challenge. So we see also that one of the biggest risks is financial. It's to manage the risk of the project. So I think that in US, for once, they are more reasonable than in Europe on this point of view. So they are much more flexible to provide long-term contract. Okay, not 20 years for battery, but at least 5-10 years. We see it for renewables. Wind was a cash cow in Europe because, okay, you sign a contract for 20 years and you have a guaranteed revenue with feed-in tariff, etc. And it was the same for PV. So what is interesting today, for a new technology, this luxury is not yet available anymore. We are asked to compete on the market, to be with very old technology, dirty technology, and for an emerging market, for new technology, it's very difficult, because we still need to develop, we need financing, we need grants, we need, it's like if 20 years ago we would say to the wind sector, okay, go on the market and propose a cheaper solution than what is today available, that we would have no wind turbine in the world. So that's also, I think, for message to government regulation is that, okay, think about how you can support the sector, but okay, not just to give money just like that. Of course, we need to find a correct win-win.
Okay. Okay, Mark, sorry.
Just one last comment on that, because that providing certainty to technology providers does not necessarily hurt consumers either. And I'll use California as an example, where California has almost treated its role in the world as the venture capitalists of the world when it comes to new grid technology and renewables. And yet power prices in California are lower than they are in Europe. They're lower than they are in Australia, which is almost all coal-fired generation. They're lower than they are in a large portion of the world. So it does not necessarily hurt ratepayers in the long run. And I think that's a fear that a lot of areas have, is that by providing certainty to technology providers, you hurt ratepayers. And I don't think that's necessarily the case at all, if programs are well designed.
Great. We're coming close to the end now, and my little device here that's giving me questions has run out of battery charge. I just want to pick up on the top question on the screen there about battery chemistries for some of our other speakers maybe to address, in terms of which battery chemistry do you think will dominate the grid, maybe in the longer term. Donghi? Yeah.
So I think maybe we should defend what is short term and long term. If 1 hour is short, then 1 hour is short term. I think lithium-ion battery will be dominator. And for the 4 hour plus, I think NAS battery maybe, but NAS battery, they are shortcoming, and because after so many years, the cost not decrease, so I think maybe the lead carbon can take the role for the 4 hour plus the long term. Okay.
Okay. Vlad, you heard? Yes.
Just
fighting.
Just a small comment about this. In fact, we talked about too many solutions, several applications, and my point of view is that there is no one specific technology. Technology depends on the needs and on the application. There is a big market that is in front of us related to electrical cars, but there is also a big market related to public lighting with the solar application. There are large large plants like CSP that could use thermal storage that allow the very competitive price in comparison with PV. So if we can come back to the main subject, which is energy sustainability, let's say, and what was said by Gauthier, we have a need, and we need to find a solution depending on the need, and we need to act for. So my point of view is that there is a market for various technologies, and depending on the needs on the application, each technology could find a place. Thank you.
Well, just to add to that, I also don't think there is a straightforward answer to that. I think I agree with Mark that grid storage, battery technologies are driven by battery development for transport applications, which has a, if you look at the capacity that is in the transportation at the moment, it's at least 10 times larger, or possibly much more larger than what is installed in the grid. Looking at that industry, we're seeing that, well, we promise not to get too much details on chemistries, but I think NMC and NCA chemistries are dominating, LFP probably more in Asia. So as I said, we're probably going to see less cobalt that drives the cost of the batteries up. But I think at the initial stage, these are the chemistries that will also dominate lithium-ion in storage applications. But as maybe that's near term, but then as we go to the long-term forecast, then I guess and it will depend on many factors, but to fully break into the energy market, you need longer duration batteries, and that niche will be taken by perhaps high temperature batteries, flow batteries that are less developed at the moment, but I think to a large extent that is due to their applications being limited in transport. So.
Takashi. Yes.
For the short term, all of you joining here, you are witnessing what's happening in the market right now. So the answer is pretty simple. But if you see for the long term, the answer would be slightly different. So it depends on the time frame, of course. So for the next 5 to 10 years, probably lithium-ion battery is still in the main course. But definitely other chemistries, including our flow battery systems, improving our cost and chemistries. So definitely we want to be a major player in that area. And more than that, yesterday, I'm quite impressed about Mr. Amin's, IRENA's Director General's speech yesterday's morning session. He said, you are going toward the age of abundant renewables. Abundant renewables, wow. So, and he added, 2050. Oh, I'm dead at the time, but that should be okay. Okay. But abundant renewables introduces another market situation, definitely. So first one is marginal price, marginal cost for energy will be lowering. Actually, what we are seeing today. And at the same time, volatility of the energy is also, on the other hand, increasing. So you need, you have to stabilize both anyhow. So, that implies me, what's happening, that was happening in the telecom industry. That was my previous job. And, in the telecom industry, internet, you see, you don't care about, file size, how much megabyte, a gigabyte you are transmitting. Just you care about bandwidth. See? So probably the same situation will be happening in the utility industry for the long run. Yeah. So energy is no more a big deal or less deal, but capacity will be a very important role.
Okay.
That is my message.
Thank you. I think that's a very good point to conclude on. We're reaching the end of our time.
May I? Okay. What a question! I don't know who asked the question, but you see that we are fighting to give our opinion. So that okay. Thank you. So I would like to wrap up this. Is that short-term EV is the driver. So the technology development for the power sector, it's a kind of positive collateral damage. So it will continue like that until EV really develops, so we still have time. And also what is important to understand is that the key factor for batteries for cars is weight, okay, because they have to transport themselves. Weight for the power sector is no issue at all. Okay, so on the long term, the development for EV will not match our needs. Okay, so our needs, it's flexibility, cost, etc. So that's one point. The second one, okay, I'm glad to hear that people are talking about high temperature ceramic batteries. So thank you. And flow batteries also, we struggle to find a place because by the technology itself, it's for long duration. So we cannot compete for 30 minutes. Okay, but because this is the market, especially in UK for the moment, okay, we can just look at this. So one last very interesting point, okay, without breaching any confidentiality, there are big names, especially in Europe, coming to us or to flow battery manufacturer to try to develop partnership with us for long-term development of storage. The reason is that they missed the train of lithium-ion. Okay, now it's everything is done in Asia and it's too late. So if you are a big company, you want to enter the market, you know, the barrier, the entry costs are so high that you will lose it. So now they are looking at, okay, like a chicken without a head at other technologies. And so I'm here there to pick up the chicken and to explain them that, okay, there are alternatives. So, okay, so let's see how it will be. But short-term, lithium-ion, long-term, several technology. I fully agree with you, Rashid. Thank you.
Okay, well, I think that really is the end now. But I'm sure this has enticed you to think about electricity storage in a different way. It's still a very complex situation. There's a lot of things to learn about the markets, the technologies, how regulation and policy can progress. I'm sure we can carry on these conversations later. Please join me in saying thank you to the panel. Thank you.